22 of Video-a-Day Debruary. Today's guest is going to talk to you about self-sabotage. So if you've ever asked yourself these questions, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep having a situation where nothing that I ever want, nothing I try really works out the way that I want it to? Sometimes we have a tendency to blame other people or other extenuating circumstances, but in many instances is because of you and the fact that you're self-sabotaging. So Dr. Seti is a therapist, an author, a speaker, a coach, and a formal yo-yo dieter. A lot of her work focuses on weight management and weight loss, but the core of that in her newest book is on self-sabotage. She maintains a private practice in San Diego, California, where she works one-on-one with individuals, helping them understand their maladaptive behaviors and thought patterns while replacing them with healthier perspective that allows them to overcome self-sabotage and thrive. And that's what we're here to do this month, is teach you how to win at life. Dr. Seti helps her patients understand their barriers and achieve success through behavioral, lifestyle, and cognitive changes. And she's going to share a few tips with you today so that you can do the same. So let's welcome her to the show. Hey, Dr. Seti.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I love the fact that you're from California.
Oh, see, and I was just about to say, I love the winning at life concept. I almost wish I could have gone back and renamed my book that.
And I was trying to think of a theme for this year. Every year has a different theme. And I couldn't come up with one. I dreamed the night before this, I dreamed it. And then I said, okay, well, there you go. And that was it.
Perfect.
And it became winning at life.
Love it. I love it.
I think my subconscious was talking, girl. So tell me now, since most of your work does deal with weight management, have you found that self-sabotage is basically a crossover kind of attitude, not just limited to weight?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, weight management is just an application of self-sabotage, right? The population I work with, the individuals that struggle with their weight, they don't struggle because they don't know how to be healthy. They struggle because they self-sabotage. So, my focus on weight management has just been this specific application of addressing self-sabotage. Yeah.
I was looking, let me grab my copy of your book, because there's something in here that really caught my attention. Removing positives from our lives. And you started talking about the different ways that we do that. Can you kind of highlight a few of those for us?
Sure. So in my book, I identify 9 different subtypes of self-sabotage. And within those 9, there are 3 categories. One of those is removing positives from our lives. So there are 3 self-sabotage styles that remove positive things from our lives. And oh gosh, it's taxing my memory now, but I think it's the control freak, the avoider, and the self-protector. And all of these individuals engage in behaviors that essentially, like I said, remove positive things from our lives. So, the control freak is basically somebody who tries to be prepared for every situation and every interaction. And so they're controlling everything around them. And as a result, they tend to avoid situations where they're less likely to have control and often become fearful of those situations. So it limits their social engagements, it limits their social opportunities. And so that's a way that they remove these positive things from their life. The self-protector, right? Somebody who's covered in that metaphorical armor, right? That person that's always on the defense and keeps their guard up because they think an attack can be hovering around any corner. And so as a result, their relationships, especially their romantic relationships, never have any real depth or emotionality or often longevity. And so they miss out on the benefits of these deeper relationships, right? They miss out on the benefits of allowing themselves to be vulnerable. So that's a positive thing that they remove from their lives. And then the avoider clearly generally just keeps themselves away from any situation that could cause them anxiety or push them out of their comfort zone. So it limits so many different growth opportunities, so many different potential enjoyable opportunities and experiences that they basically don't let be a part of their lives. So
that's terrible.
I know, and we all do it. So
yeah, You're right. I can't even say anything. I think one thing that I really like about this book, and I wanted to share this with viewers, is all throughout here she has checklists. So you're not just reading the information and trying to retain it. She's asking you a lot of questions, like this one here. How do I lower my self-worth? This was fabulous. I mean, I cannot say enough good things about this book. Can
Oh,
you
that's wonderful.
kind of
Thank
go
you.
over some of these things and how, because to me, the self-sabotage is hand in hand with damaging our self-esteem and our our confidence and our belief in ourselves. I just can't see how you
Hmm.
could have one without the other.
Yep. Yeah.
How do we lower our self-worth and end up, and how does that tie into sabotage?
Well, our self-worth or our self-esteem is so strongly correlated with self-sabotaging behaviors, right? Your level of self-esteem basically determines whether you feel you're deserving of things, right? Whether you feel you're deserving of success or love or happiness. And if you believe you're worthy of something and you want it, you're going to make it happen. But if you don't believe you deserve these things, then you probably won't push yourself towards your goals, or maybe in fact even stand in your way of achieving those goals, right? Self-sabotage, which really ultimately deepens that feeling of worthlessness. And on the flip side, self-sabotage can also cause low self-esteem. So there's like a chicken and egg
Oh, interesting.
relationship, right? Where, by continuing to engage in these self-sabotaging behaviors and not allowing yourself to achieve your goals, you can start to feel bad about yourself and your capabilities. And over time, these feelings are more and more deeply rooted until it becomes, unclear which is causing the other. So,
One
they
thing
both cause each other.
that really bothers me. Okay, sometimes something will come up, an opportunity, um, a chance to try. I don't know, try something, achieve something, grow, develop, and instead of just trying it, I've heard people actually say this. Well, I don't know. It's probably not going to work out anyway because So why should I even try?
Assuming. That's the assumer. That's one of the 9 self-sabotage
Oh,
styles.
is it? Okay, I must have
Hmm.
skipped that page.
Yeah, no, that's the assumer, right? That's the individual who essentially decides the outcome before it ever happens so that they never need to have that experience. And, one of the other, we talked about the idea of, the subcategories of removing positive things from our lives. But one of the other subcategories is creating self-fulfilling prophecies. And the assumer is one of those, right? The assumer is somebody who's always predicting the future and acting on those predictions before seeing if they come true. So they decide how they're going to feel. They decide what's going to happen. They decide how people are going to react to them before they even enter the situation. And it prevents them from taking action and keeps them stuck. So closes them off to new opportunities and ultimately never allows them to prove themselves wrong because they don't engage in that behavior. They just assume the outcome and assume they were right and keep moving forward with those assumptions. So it's a way that people self-sabotage and to keep themselves stuck in the process.
Do you find that there are certain behavior patterns that are more prevalent uh, and more common amongst women than there are men, or is it about the same?
The one that's most common in women, and this is based on a lot of the research, is overthinking. The idea of sitting and stewing in something and the concept of thinking it to death, where you see, and you're laughing because you could probably relate to this, right?
Yeah, I think I don't think enough. I tend to make like gut decisions.
Oh, that could be a good thing. That sounds like almost the opposite. But women are very prone to this idea of overthinking, the idea of, thinking about something and thinking about the outcome and what they said and how they responded and what they could have said differently and how they could have done something differently. And, going over and over and over again over this. This is, another sabotage style that creates self-fulfilling prophecies. But ultimately, the overthinker, puts this extreme emphasis on the negative. So even something small can turn into like a spiral of anxious thoughts. And over time, this behavior strips them of their confidence, creates this constant self-doubt, and again, sets them up for this self-fulfilling prophecy. So it
What a
creates the
nightmare.
situation, where their thinking stops them from taking action, and it can be debilitating.
So, one thing that we forgot to do at the top of this, because I just jumped right in. When you use the term self-sabotage, what does that
Uh-huh.
really mean?
Well, there's a lot of different definitions of it, but I like to talk about it very simply as standing in your own way. If you imagine the idea of wanting something and then engaging in a behavior that moves you in the opposite direction. For example, somebody who wants a job but doesn't ever apply to a job. For somebody who wants a relationship but doesn't ever put themselves out there for dating. Somebody who wants weight loss but constantly uses the "I'll start tomorrow" thinking, right? This idea of I want this and I'm not going to engage in any behaviors that get me towards it. In fact, I'm going to engage in the opposite. I'm going to do behaviors that move me farther away from it. So it's the idea of really standing in your own way, creating your own barriers, hurdles, and obstacles so that you're not achieving the things that you feel you want to achieve.
Do you think sometimes that people self-sabotage because they're actually afraid of success?
Absolutely. I talk in my book a lot about the causes of self sabotage, and there are all these different factors. Some things we've talked about, like these, the confidence issue, the self doubt issue. There's a control issue that we talked about in some of these styles. There are thinking patterns that lend us to self sabotage, like all or nothing thinking and thinking these black and white terms. But overarching all of these causes is fear.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's fear of success, sometimes it's fear of failure, sometimes it's fear of change, sometimes it's fear of the unknown, but there's this overarching fear concept. And a lot of people don't understand why fear of success or fear of failure are a thing, right? Where that comes from. Like success is a good thing, right? Objectively speaking, why would somebody be scared of success? That's something that we want. But there's a lot of expectations that come along with success. There's a lot of judgments that come with success. Somebody who has self-esteem issues often fears this idea, has this imposter syndrome and fears being found out as a fraud. There's all these other expectations tied to success where people have this what now effect, where, I wanted this for so long. If I achieve it, well, then what? What do I focus on? What am I all about? And what if this thing I've wanted for so long doesn't actually make me happy? And then I have to go back to the drawing board and figure something out. So there are all these fears associated with success and just as many associated with failure. And I know people think it's kind of a funny thing that they would self-sabotage for fear of failure, because ultimately self-sabotage kind of creates the same outcome. But when you're self-sabotaging to create that negative outcome, you're in control of it. It's something that you're choosing. It's something that you're making happen. If you actively try to do something, let's say, you really want a job or you really want a relationship, and, you put in all this extra work, all this extra time and effort at work, you do all these extra projects, you apply for this job, and then you don't get it. That's a massive blow to your ego that a lot of people can't come to terms with. But if you simply don't do all of that work, you can say, well, I didn't get the job because I didn't do all of the work. So of course that didn't happen. Same thing with
Oh,
dating, right? If you put all of this effort into dating, you're super active, maybe you're meeting a lot of people, you're going out a lot, you're active on the dating apps, and nothing comes to you, it again feels like this massive blow to your ego. And a lot of people struggle with that. So to protect their ego, they just don't do that. And then they can say, it's not that nobody likes me. It's not that I wasn't any good at dating. It's that I didn't try. I didn't put in the effort. So this fear of failure, while it leads to failure, it leads to failure in a different way, a way that we're in control of, so we don't have to internalize the failure.
so it is failure, but it's not a personal. It's just
Yeah,
some kind of
it's
vague
behavioral
concept.
as opposed to
Yeah.
something about me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if people are in this caught in this pattern of self-sabotaging, I think your checklist helped them recognize that. Is that why those
hmm
checklists are there?
Yep, they're there to gain kind of understanding of what they do, how they do that, and then eventually work on taking steps to change that.
Okay, so what not like you were trying to give away your whole book, but maybe I don't know, one or two things that someone can start thinking about, If you've realized that after listening to this show, hey, I've done those things, maybe one or two things they can start thinking about to start making a change.
Well, I always say first and foremost, you have to pay attention. You have to know how you self-sabotage in order to be able to do something about it. So, I encourage people, first to start just paying attention to all of those negative thoughts in their head, the ones that say, don't do it, or put it off, or you'll never succeed, or like you said, you're not going to have a good time, so don't bother. Pay attention to those thoughts, because those are the thoughts that set you up to criticize yourself or think negatively about your capabilities or your future, and start tracking them. Literally writing them down so you can see where the repetition comes up to truly understand your own personal brand of self-sabotage, because you need to know how you do this in order to fight it. And so I talk about, all of these different self-sabotage styles, and the way to address it and start changing it depends on how you actually self-sabotage. So we talked about, I'll give an example of one of them. We talked about, some of these sabotage styles that create self-fulfilling prophecies, like the overthinker, like the assumer. With all of these, they set you up to believe something that's not actually true, right? They create these self-fulfilling prophecies. So you end up believing the outcome is true because you don't give yourself the opportunity to prove it wrong, right? I'm not going to have any fun at the party, so I shouldn't go. And you don't go. So the best way to change this pattern is to respond with something called opposite action, which is as simple as it sounds. The idea of responding with the exact opposite of what your self-sabotage tells you to do. So if your self-sabotage is saying, don't go to the party, you won't have any fun, go to the party and see what happens. If it's saying, you work best under pressure, so you should procrastinate, choose to do it now instead of putting off and see what comes from it. If your self-sabotage tells you, somebody probably doesn't like you, so you shouldn't call them, do the exact opposite and call them and see how they respond to you. The idea here with this opposite action is about giving yourself more data, more evidence to show you exactly where your self-sabotage is steering you wrong, and ultimately create new perspectives on some of this. So that's a really effective behavioral response you can use if you're somebody that creates self-fulfilling prophecies as your personal brand of self-sabotage.
Thank you for that. Those are two very easy to institute ideas that I think people can take away from this interview and start trying to use right away. But I do plan to put a link to your book down below anyway.
Oh, great.
So we talked about the different types of self-sabotage. What about people who do what I call overreaching? These are people who, they have, good confidence in themselves. They're not, what doesn't seem to be, but their idea of what they can achieve and the goals that they set for themselves are a little, I know there's something called a stretch goal, but this is just to the point of ridiculousness. Like saying, I'm going to go to this hospital, I'm going to be a doctor, and you haven't set foot in nary a medical school. It's that bad to me. What do you do with people like that? It's just, I don't know if they're unrealistic or they have just a ridiculously high opinion of themselves. I don't quite know what to do with that. So I've been saving that question to ask you.
Well, it almost sounds
crazy, but it happens so much.
Yeah. And it sounds a bit like a perfectionist mentality, right?
Oh.
When I talk about the perfectionist mentality, I talk about the person that has an ideal in mind for everything, right? A standard that they're always trying to meet or live up to. And the problem with this thinking is, well, it creates this all or nothing behavior loop, but the standards are too high to ever achieve, right? Perfect is too high to ever achieve. And so what happens is that person ultimately always fails because the only option is perfect or nothing, right? There's nothing in between. And so they're constantly setting themselves up to try and achieve perfect, and they never do. So in their brain, they achieve nothing. It's this all or nothing behavior loop, which ultimately over time creates kind of avoidance behavior and definitely sets these people up for self-criticism and self-attack, right? They beat themselves up because they feel like they can't do anything right. They're never able to achieve the goals they set out for themselves. But the problem isn't that they're incapable or that they can't achieve. The problem is the goals are too high. The goals are not realistic. And so a lot of that is about looking at goal setting for that person and scaling it back. Almost like the idea of embracing an 80-20 mentality instead of a 100 and 0. But saying, okay, so I want to go to medical school. Okay, well, if going to medical school is the goal, what are like the 30 steps that would lead up to that? And how can I approach step 1? And just start there and kind of build on that instead of taking on this massive component. In the same way, you might look at the idea of cleaning your house. And if you say, I have to clean my house, that feels like a lot and overwhelming. But if you say, I need to do the dishes, okay, I can do that. And then maybe later I'll say, okay, I need to do some laundry. Okay, I can do that. And then maybe later you'll say, I need to vacuum in the bedroom. Okay, I can do that, right? Breaking it down into these smaller components makes these things more achievable and ultimately sets us up for success instead of failure, which this other mode of thinking tends to do.
How would we apply this to I just thought of another example where we are seeing this a lot. Women are statistically starting to outpace men, educationally, professionally, and, catching up to them in income. So there are a lot of women who are getting involved with dating and marrying, living with whatever, men that are not anywhere near on their level. And they repeat this pattern, hoping for a good outcome, I suppose. But I'm starting to wonder now if it's something involved with, if it's another component of self-sabotage. What do you think? They say they want this great relationship with someone but this is to me a guy who's not capable of even giving those things. So what's
well, and that's what I was going to get at is, is the person not on their level, so to speak, from, a career standpoint, education standpoint? That's to me less relevant than if they're on their level emotionally and from a needs standpoint, if this person is able to meet their needs or not. And if not, and they know that going in, certainly that's a form of self-sabotage where maybe, they're dating that person out of fear of getting hurt, out of fear of failing, out of fear of pushing themselves out of their comfort zone, out of fear of not being enough, fear of being exposed. And the idea is, if they can date somebody that doesn't feel like they're quote unquote above them, that they have this opportunity to say, okay, well, maybe I can be enough here, but I wouldn't be enough for somebody better, somebody higher, somebody who actually is able to meet my needs, because maybe I don't deserve that. Maybe I'm not worthy enough, or maybe there's too much risk involved in that. Again, risk of getting hurt, risk of failing. Or once again, here we go back to the possibility of risk of success and fear of success and how that might tie in. I see this a lot. I'm sure you do too. People who say, as soon as I get into a relationship, everything will be good. Everything will be better. I just need to be in a relationship. And then there's this what if thing. Well, what if that doesn't solve all your problems? What if that doesn't make everything better? And so, underlying all that is this level of self-sabotage so that they never have to expose themselves to that what if situation. So I think there's definitely a lot of self-sabotage going on in that. If people are dating people who are actively not meeting their needs, who are actively not balancing them, supporting them, giving them what they really feel they need in a relationship, then there's generally a self-sabotage component going on there.
Oh, I'm so happy you said that. It just happens so much. I mean, these guys, they don't want to work. They don't help with, housework. It's just one thing after another. So I'm so happy you addressed that. Well, let me give you a moment to, tell people where they can find you and make any closing comments on self-sabotage that you want to share that maybe we didn't touch on.
All right. Well, you can find me on my website or social media. My website is meonlybetter.com. Also, the weight loss side of things is theweightlosstherapist.com. So either of those websites, and all of them have links to my social media. I'm pretty active. I post tips and tricks and ideas and links and all sorts of fun stuff every day. Also, you can connect with me. There's ways to message me through there as well. And in regards to kind of self-sabotage, I mean, one of the things I try and encourage everybody to embrace is that self-sabotage is pretty universal. We all do it, but that doesn't mean we have to keep doing it. Seeing that we do it is not a problem. Accepting that we do it and not doing anything about it is the problem. So by looking at it, by saying I do this, you can then actively start taking steps to do something about it and to change it. So, I mean, without being too cheesy, the idea of there is hope, right? There is possibility, there is a way out, there is a way to overcome this and become what I call a sabotage warrior.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming through and sharing these tips with us. I think this will be extremely helpful.
Oh,
It
good. I'm so
definitely help
glad.
people, position themselves to become winners at life, because these
Yes. Well,
kind of
that's the goal,
behaviors
right?
permeate everybody's life, like you said.
Uh-huh.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Dr.
Thank you
Seti.
so much for having me.
I loved it. This was a great interview. I'll be in
Oh,
touch soon.
wonderful. Sounds good.
Okay, everybody. That was Dr. Candice Seti, a California girl. I like it because we got that sister thing going on. But self-sabotage, I mean, I was so happy that she reached out, because to me, this is one of the issues that's at the core for why so many women make poor decisions about the relationships that they get involved in and stay in. As Dr. Candice pointed out, just because you are involved in self-sabotaging does not mean that you have to continue to do it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Stick around and we'll see. We've got some more stuff for you coming up tomorrow, every day for the month of February 2022. I'll see you later.